well, let's see this off. Vinales has signed an annual contract with an option for renewal. He will go up alongside his former Suzuki teammate, Aleix Espargaro. So should we just sort of finish this up with that? Vinales rejoining Aleix. Keith, that's going to be a good thing. They've got good history together.
I think it's going to be okay. I think that what you got to remember is one is going to still want to beat the other one, into the corner. It's perfectly natural. They're racing people. And Aleix Espargaro is a hard man. He's a sensitive man. He's a passionate man. He's got great morals. I enjoy listening to Aleix. I enjoy watching him get revved up over things. I mean, he's a proper guy. If he's got it on his mind, you're going to know about it. But if he's your teammate, he's not an easy man to beat, Aleix. And I think that having someone quality alongside him in Aprilia, that's why I miss the Andrea business. Iannone, it's such a shame that went the way it went. I mean, the idiots ruined his career and mucked up Aprilia's trajectory, and us as fans, the privilege of watching him develop the bike. Because Iannone, despite the fact he's actually quite mad, was a brilliant motorbike racer and among the top half dozen motorbike racers. He was well capable of beating anybody out on the racetrack. But unfortunately, he was only very good at beating himself one way or another. So Maverick's capable of seeing off Aleix, but Aleix mentally is probably more likely to see off Maverick. We'll see.
In some way, Keith, I don't know if you agree with me, but it almost reminds me of Marco Melandri a little bit. Another rider who was a champion in the smaller classes, super talented race winner in MotoGP, but just some teams it would work with him and other times it wouldn't. And, I remember he had podiums, I think he was with Petronas Yamaha at the start of one season, and then the results just went off a cliff. And the rest of the year it just went. But then he changed to another team, it would click together, and bang, he'd be up there. And then he joined Kawasaki. Kawasaki withdrew. He was left on that year-old bike, the Hayate thing with no logos, nothing to do with Kawasaki, and he put it on the podium. And I think in Superbike, when he went to Superbike, it was kind of the same. Stunningly great, everything looking good, but it would just all change, and it was never quite clear why.
It never is quite clear, and that's the trouble, isn't it? I mean, everything that's going north of the eyebrows is what makes a difference at the end of the day. Just depends on your personality to a great extent. I mean, there are those that choke and those that don't. I mean, we're getting to the British Grand Prix at the weekend. Home Grand Prix, we can talk about that perhaps, I suppose, as well. What happens in a home Grand Prix? Some people raise their game, beyond what you would have imagined, and others fail miserably at their home Grand Prix. You get over it after a couple of years, and suddenly a home Grand Prix is like every other Grand Prix. But your first one or two, they're spectacularly important to a rider. I don't know. I think that the Aprilia thing, it's going to be about management. I hope Aprilia have learnt from what's happened at Yamaha in a managerial sense of the team. I think that I'm not saying that Lynn Jarvis or the rest of them didn't give Maverick a fair swipe at this. I think they probably did. I mean, Yamaha is a good team. They've been around a long time. They've worked with the likes of Lorenzo, so it ain't like they haven't had any practice with somebody who's a little bit difficult. It's a situation, but I think it runs deeper than that. I think they need another dimension of understanding when it comes to Maverick Vinales, and that's a slightly worrying side of it from all of us. I mean, you look in and you don't cringe because of his position. You cringe because you wonder what's going on in his head. When he stood up and made those apologies the other day, they were sincere, but devastating to watch. I thought it's just terrible. You made this unbelievable mistake, which was bound to lead to where you are. There was no other option that he left Yamaha with. You can't attempt to blow the bloody bike up and then expect the Japanese to just roll over and let you do it, or bring the whole team into disrepute. It just was never going to be something he was going to get away with. I mean, I can't remember who said it now, but it wasn't me. I pinched it off somebody. If you fart on those bikes, it's on the telemetry. They know exactly what's going on. It wasn't like there was any doubt about. It was no excuse he was going to be able to make, because everything is recorded. Everything. There isn't a thing that they don't know. But my problem was what was he trying to achieve? What was it? I know it's frustration. And you might rev the thing on the rev limiter once, maybe twice on the way around in frustration, but your frustration doesn't last for a couple of laps. He clearly was trying to make the thing go bang. That's a serious old thing. And I wonder where we go with Aprilia.
It really makes you question, doesn't it, what is going on in that brain of Maverick Vinales? Well, the outcome of all of that is he has signed with Aprilia. Whether he will make an on-track debut with him this year remains to be seen. But of course, what it has done, it's had a knock-on effect with a couple of other riders as well. And from having, well, no British riders to having two now at the British Grand Prix. Cal Crutchlow already coming in as a replacement, makes his move up, as we said, to the factory Yamaha. Jake Dixon will step up from Moto2 to replace Crutchlow at Petronas SRT. Let's talk about Jake Dixon, because we've already done sort of Crutchlow in his first sort of outings already. Jake already kind of been linked with the Yamaha outfit regarding a 2022 seat. This is going to be an audition for him, isn't it? But like you say, it's a home Grand Prix. It's swim or sink.
He's had this audition before, though, in Moto2. He came in and rode in Moto2, and he rode very, very well and impressed everybody. And there's a rider that won't choke at the British Grand Prix. Jake reminds me of Barry Sheene. Now, most people will know that geezer. He's got that personality, that Jack the Lad, that kind of on the surface of it, not too serious. But I knew Barry pretty well, was his teammate for a while, and everything under the surface was bloody serious. There wasn't anything he said, did, or rode that he wasn't thinking about in depth. And I think that I have the feeling that Jake is coming to that point. He's kind of now got that little bit more age on board. He's got, when he rode superbikes, he was a good superbike rider. He had a bit of a blip in the early days in Moto2, but fortunately that came good, courtesy of I can't remember his name now. Who was the guy that came in and helped him with one arm? Can't remember now. But anyway, he came in and basically, because Jake had a bang on the head at Kota, he ended up with a teammate who took over the ride. And because that teammate couldn't make it work either, it meant that they suddenly started to believe in Jake, and then Jake came good again. I think that some riders work better on bigger and more powerful motorbikes, and I've got a feeling that Jake's one of them. I think he's going to take very, very well to a MotoGP bike. He's a big bike racer. And I've got a feeling that he's going to take this bike like a duck to water. And I can see him with half a result at Silverstone. It's a big ask. It's a massive ask. Go back to what we said right at the beginning of this. MotoGP is the most competitive motorbikes, the most competitive riders there's ever been, ever in the Premiership class, in depth. If he finished last, he wouldn't be embarrassing himself, and he'd still be on the same lap. Go back a few years, and some quite big names were lapped twice in the British Grand Prix. It's a situation where that doesn't happen anymore because of the depth of field, both in talent and in machinery. So I think Jake's going to get on well. It's Cal I'm slightly more concerned about. I mean, I didn't expect Cal to be anywhere near like he was prior. I think Cal was a rider who really, really had reached a peak. He was riding brilliantly, really good MotoGP rider. But to step back in, he knew what he'd got to do. He hadn't had that much time on a bike. His second ride in Austria, didn't probably go quite as well as I thought it might. Silverstone, though, he's going to pull the stops out. He's going to want to ride. He's going to want to race properly. But even so, having said that, a top 10 is a big ask. To be in the top 10, Danny Pedrosa, he looked sharp in Austria on the KTM, when we saw him there. Pedrosa probably got to where we thought he might as an entry. Will Cal in the top 10? We'll see. Hopefully, there's quite a few trolls on the internet that are already saying, well, he'll crash. And I think even I mentioned that he's going to crash, because Cal will crash, because he will be trying that hard. If he's not crashing at least once or twice during these three events that we're going to see him at, then basically he's a test rider. He's no longer the racer he was, because Cal would normally push his luck to the very, very edge of staying on the bike, and that's what it takes to be in the top 10. So we'll see if he's up for it this weekend.
Well, great to have both of them on the grid, isn't it, Pete, for this weekend? And it's an important time as well for Jake, with, of course, all the news about the Sepang Petronas team closing its outfits, of course, in Moto2 and Moto3. So it's come at the perfect time for Jake to showcase himself properly on the Premier class.
as you say, Harry, it is an audition. It doesn't matter what anyone says. Anytime a young rider gets on a MotoGP bike, it's an audition. It might not be an audition for, let's say, the Petronas team even, but all of the other teams will be looking. They will always be looking at a young guy that comes in to see if he's got the potential. So absolutely, people up and down the pit lane will be looking at what Jake does this weekend, looking to see if he's got that consistent improvement, knowing the limitations of the bike. It's a 2019 bike, basically. It's got the top speed disadvantage. Cal was saying he thinks that bike will go better around Silverstone. It's a bit more flowing than the Austrian circuit. As Keith says, the competition is incredibly hard. For me, if Jake can just make a race of it, meaning if he can mix it with the regular guys, that is a massive achievement in itself by the end of one weekend. And it does sound like this will be just the British Grand Prix for Jake, and maybe his teammate Xavi Vierge will be on the bike in Aragon, is the rumour. Now, but at the same time, as we say, as far as their futures, it seems like it's Darren Binder, maybe even Dovi or someone else who are the ones linked with the race seat in MotoGP. So where does that leave, also the Moto3 riders at Petronas, with the Moto2 and Moto3 teams sort of departing? There's a lot of people looking for seats next year. And there's no better way for Jake to put that advertisement firmly in the front of people's minds than to do a good job on a MotoGP bike in the British Grand Prix.
Well, actually, just on
SRT have found a new sponsor, haven't they? They've managed to get themselves a new sponsor, but it doesn't spread down to the Moto3 and Moto2 team. Interesting that Adam Norridin is back in again this weekend in Jake's place on the Moto2 bike. So I've just seen the list that came from IRTA earlier. So he's back out at Silverstone. It's remember Norridin? We've almost forgotten him already, haven't we? A couple of years ago, he was the hot shoe coming up through Malaysia and dropped off the edge of the proverbial talent cliff. Can happen so easy.
I mean, Razlan and, I know the guys at the Sepang circuit, they put a lot of time and effort into Adam Norridin, didn't they? He was the great hope of, we were talking previously about the need for a Malaysian rider in the team. And I think they really wanted Adam to be that guy, but he kind of struggled. So he stepped back from Grand Prix. I think he was doing Moto2 CEV. And there was always the hope that he could grow in that championship and then come across into the Moto2 team. Well, we now know that unfortunately the Moto2 team is not going to exist after this year. So in a way, it's a good last chance for him to get on that bike and ride in Grand Prix. And again, also for him, as an advertisement for next year, there's, have another Malaysian rider on the grid potentially if he can show that, he's got the pace and the potential.
Malcolm. What disappointed me, and sorry, Harry, you're not going to get a word in.
No, go on.
No, you're not going to get a word in, sorry. What disappointed me, Peter and Harry, is that they didn't upgrade John McPhee. John McPhee's got nothing to lose in Moto3 at all. He's nowhere in that championship this year, so the championship's gone. He's not got to ride with them next year. You could have easily slotted John McPhee in on the Moto2 bike at the British Grand Prix, and, well, I mean, you just guaranteed the last ticket being sold if that was the case.
That was going to be my question, Keith. Malcolm Sharp asked, what's going to happen with John McPhee?
Well, McPhee will be working hard behind the scenes. But again, John McPhee has had a fairly long tenure in Grand Prix racing. Difficult to see where he goes next. I mean, he's a survivor. There's no doubt about that. He survived being elbowed out. I mentioned the dropping off the edge of the talent cliff. He's been teetering on the edge of that cliff for a few years, one way and another. But he's still a Grand Prix winner. He's still fast. He's still got the talent to win races in Grand Prix, and you can't say that about 80% of the people around him. So McPhee is somebody that you would take a risk on, but every year that goes by, there's this bloody great bottleneck of really talented riders, back through CEV. Pete mentioned it earlier on. CEV, the Junior World Championships, it's like a secondary Grand Prix list. These are the guys that are really going to be filling the slots. Do you go with a 28-year-old Scotsman who's won a couple of Grand Prix, that's fast occasionally, as in, I'd say that's not true, he's fast all the time, but who seems to have hugely bad luck? Like quite a lot of the incidents that happen around John McPhee are just bad luck. I don't know how many bloody cats he's run over on the way to a circuit at some stage, but there's something somewhere I'm sure my wife, who's a Buddhist, would be able to tell me all about karma and the like, and give me another one of those lessons that I get quite regularly. Maybe I should pass it on to McPhee. But there is, maybe, I don't know what he did in a previous life, but whatever it was, it obviously wasn't very good, because his luck has not been really with him when he could have done with it. And quite often it is only luck.
That is a great point, Keith. I'm sure McPhee would have loved the chance, as you say, with his future kind of uncertain, to just, if you can show what you can do on a Moto2 bike, that could open a lot of doors, because it just takes that risk out, doesn't it? Oh, okay, we can see you can adapt to the bike. We can see the potential. I guess looking at it from the other side, it might be that the team said, look, John, you've got a chance to win your home British Grand Prix here, and maybe that's it. But again, we were talking about Aragon. If Vierge is going up and riding, that's another seat spare at Aragon, But yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it positively, you'd say that the Moto3 team with Binder and McPhee have a chance of winning races. But yeah, I think with Binder's future is looking a lot more secure than John's. And John has tried to go to Moto2 for several years, hasn't he, Keith? I know you've spoken about this in the past. So yeah, getting the chance.
Petronas didn't help him, did they? They reneged on the deal. He had the deal done at Petronas. He was supposed to go up to Moto2, but then Jake Dixon took the place, and John was kept in Moto3, and he was spitting tax over that initially. I mean, like he calmed himself down, because John knows which way his bread's buttered. His bed might be buttered as well, but that's another thing altogether.
Well, it certainly is a crucial time for all of those riders, not least John McPhee, because you think, well, it's got to be a move to Moto2. You can't really stay another year in Moto3, but we will keep abreast of that as and when it all unfolds. Malaysia, as we've discussed heavily in the news, frequently for various different reasons. Another sad reason, though, because it's been officially cancelled, the race at Sepang this year. All but one of the flyaway races now have been cancelled for 2021, with the Japanese, Australian and Thailand races all falling off the calendar, as well as the Finnish Grand Prix as well. Now, due to a rise in COVID cases, Dorna has confirmed that Malaysia is cancelled for a second year in a row. But, Keith, it's been replaced by a second event at Misano, which is good news for Italian fans, isn't it, who get an extra dose of Rossi before he retires.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame. Misano is quite a small venue. It's quite a tight place to get the amount of people that will want tickets. But give an Italian a shovel and they'll find a way underneath a fence. That is an absolute fact, particularly for the Rossi's last on Italian soil. I mean, it will be just mad. And if I was going to go to a Grand Prix, that would be the one I would want to go to. I mean, there'll be the yellow hordes that come over the hills from Tavulia during the course of qualifying and then race day. It's a sight to behold. It is, Mugello is as I've quite often said, Mugello, and boringly so, Mugello is my favourite Grand Prix of all Grand Prix. I mean, Mugello is a fantastic place, Tuscan Hills. You're not going to find a better place, a better racetrack. Misano's not as good a racetrack, but the atmosphere at Misano is incredible. And because it's so tight and there's no room, and you've got, it's funny, we were watching, I'm sure everyone else was watching the World Superbikes at Navarra at the weekend, as well as the British Superbikes up at Cadwell Park. What a couple of venues we had there. Navarra, that massively fast turn 1, where you've got Cavone turn 11 at Misano, which is round. It goes the other way round to when I was racing it, so you don't ever ask me to do a track thing on Misano, because it went the other way round. In the old days, you'd come out of a tighter hairpin and you'd be accelerating up through 3 corners, and the Cavone, which is now turn 11, you'd be going flat through there, but there was a wall that was within a couple of metres that was 10 foot high beside your right-hand side, so if you crashed there, you died. So what they did was they turned it all on its head and went the opposite way round. So now you're going through that massively fast corner. On a Moto2 bike, it's flat. You roll it onto the side of the tyre, so it's a rev limiter, and that calms it down a little bit. Moto3's flat through there. MotoGP, there's nothing flat about it, but it's bloody fast, and you run right out to the curb, and it is a spectacular corner. And then the next 3, you're coming down through the gears. But it's just a spectacular place to go and watch, and to see the Aldo Drudi, paintwork on the curbs. The guy who paints Rossi's helmets also does all the paintwork around the track. So all those, when you get the overhead shot from the helicopter and stuff, and you just think, oh, wow. You'd pay for a print of the track, not just Rossi's helmet. So it's just got that massively wonderful Italian atmosphere. There is no place like Italy. There really isn't. From an atmosphere, from a food, and from a racing point of view, you'd be hard pressed to find another country that could compete with Italy.
Interesting though, Pete. It's replacing directly the Malaysian round. They're not going to do a back-to-back for this one.
No, it's just a straight swap at the moment. But as you say, we don't really know for sure about Kota yet, the other flyaway. Yeah. So there could still be more changes to come. The issue with Malaysia was basically the government weren't willing to shift on the quarantine issue. I think it was basically down to that. And that just made the race impossible. So that's why that couldn't go ahead. But yeah, we assume that, any races that are lost, as we've seen, will be replaced by another European race. So the numbers should be about the same. But yeah, we're not sure yet. I mean, Kota was looking really safe, should we say. It would be the second non-European race, should we say, after Qatar. Qatar is the only non-European round we've had since March 2020 for MotoGP class. It's not a lot. It's been a European championship, really. And I think Dorna would love to have another overseas race, as we call them. But is it going to be possible? Who knows? It looks like, we're down to one. I mean, Argentina technically has not been cancelled, of course. That's postponed. But, I think there's a question mark clearly over both Kota and Argentina at the moment.
I would say there's a question mark over Kota. It's going to be politics and money that forces this through because they've got no ICU beds there. The big thing locally is the fact that, hospitals are full. It's a rising game in the pandemic at the moment there. There are certain rules that are also in our rather thin rule book regarding hospitals. Distances to hospitals, timeframes to hospitals, amount of beds that are available in hospitals. It's not just a case of, we're going to turn up and hope for the best. There are protocols in place to make sure that any rider that's hurt or any team member that's hurt, has adequate medical cover. If you've got no ICU beds, then you can't invent. Well, you can have a field hospital, I suppose, but then you run out of personnel to look after those people. You can't spread specialist doctors, specialist equipment in a field hospital. It's not kind of done. So, there was a time in Japan, wasn't there? I'm just trying to think who it was now that had a big off, and there's a limit. You have to be able to have a helicopter that can fly because the distance into Mito or wherever it was from the circuit was too far by road. And anybody that's driven from the local towns into the track will remember what Motegi's like. It's great. I love it. All on the sides of curves and whizzing in front of locals doing 30 mile an hour everywhere. Great fun, but not real good when you're rolling around in the back of an ambulance with concussion or something. So it had to be, the helicopter could only fly if the helicopter could fly, racing or practice or anything could continue. But then one day we had quite a lot of cloud over and a lot of mist that meant the helicopter couldn't fly. But suddenly the parameters were changed. Suddenly it was okay. They could get to the hospital within the 50 minutes that is designated. Well, let me tell you, if you've got an head injury, 50 minutes is too long. You want to be in the helicopter, dropped into the hospital, x-rays, scans and all the rest of it sorted out. So it's funny how these rules can sometimes just get bent a little bit in favour of running the event. In my view, my respect fell away a little bit that weekend in Japan because you are a long way away from a proper hospital. The stuff on site is quite good, but if you are in trauma, you want to be sure that you can be flown within 10 minutes to a hospital by helicopter, job done. But because the cloud wasn't lifting, wasn't going, suddenly there was just during the course of the meeting, there was a piece of paper that came round. I remember I took a print of it that said that we've rejigged the route and we understand that we can get to the hospital within the 50 minutes. And I remember being outraged at the time. But of course, broadcasting being broadcasting, your outrage sometimes is better kept quiet if you want to keep your job. And I remember thinking at the time that, that hurts not being able to say something about that at the time. We brought it up. We mentioned, obviously, that, the powers that be had actually checked the route, made sure that you could get to the hospital within the 50 minutes. But it was only because the helicopter couldn't fly that the parameters were changed slightly. Call me cynical. I am.
Well, 17 episodes in, I think we've got that down to a T now. Well, let's move on and talk about another track now, because it is the British Grand Prix weekend coming up. We're all very excited of it because, I mean, we're not biased, but we are all British. And I know we have an international audience, but everybody loves Silverstone. I think it's fair to say it's one of those tracks that just gets everybody's blood pumping a little bit faster. Keith, just take us round Silverstone to begin with, your thoughts on it, what you're looking forward to this weekend, especially, of course, you've been there year in, year out. Actually, we haven't been there for the last couple of years, obviously. So it's a return, and I think a long-awaited return as well.